It is an all-garden report today. Happy Easter, everybody. Sherrod, I'm going to throw you on mute while you're not talking, and vice versa, as we try to manage our garden noise out here. Sherrod Blakely here with me. Josue Pavon checking out Joe Mazzulla's press conference. He'll be with us shortly. And we'll have an preview today. Up to this Sunday. Happy Passover as well to everybody. Ramadan. This is a pretty emphatic win for the Celtics here, even though the final score pretty close. Hawks kept it close. They're back up, but Sam Hauser, Mike Muscala with a 7-for-7 start in the third quarter, and Peyton Pritchard with the 25th triple-double. And Celtics to a victory here, right? And we don't have to. Is worth hitting on here.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a game where we saw the other big three for the Boston Celtics, and we're talking about Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, and Mike Muscala. I thought that they did as expected, which you're hoping that your guys who don't play much will do when they get an opportunity to kind of have a more front and center role. I thought Sam Hauser really set the tone with his perimeter shooting, but also his movement without the basketball I thought was really good, and that kind of opened up some things for him. And Mike Muscala did exactly what the Celtics were hoping that he would do when he was given an opportunity to play, and that's knock down shots. That's really a big part of why they felt they needed to add another stretch big to the mix when you talk about Al Horford, who basically is their only other legitimate stretch big. And Peyton Pritchard, we've talked a lot about Peyton Pritchard as far as, his future with the Celtics and whether he can, what can he do to help the Celtics? And this is proof positive that the only thing that's significantly keeping him from being an impact player is playing time. You get the feeling the more you watch Peyton Pritchard play, the more you get the sense that he's going to be a really good player somewhere else besides Boston, because he's going to get a greater opportunity to play somewhere else. But give Peyton Pritchard credit. I mean, he went in there, he handled his business, he made shots, got other guys involved, did a good job on the boards, and was a big part of why the Celtics were able to get this win while their core guys pretty much watched this game from far.
Yeah, and you're thrilled with how Pritchard looks in this game. We talked to him the other night after that heel injury he suffered at the beginning of March in Cleveland at the end of that game. And he came back against Washington, played the end of that game, looked like he was limping around in the locker room after, and then missed some more time over the last couple of weeks here. I guess he's got a bone bruise in that foot he's still dealing with, plantar fasciitis. So for him to be able to go out there and give you 30 with all that going on is encouraging. Probably not going to play in the playoffs, Sherrod, but if someone goes down, he's stepping right up into that third slot at guard. And as we said, coming into this year and throughout much of this year, when he got those spot starts, you feel good about him going out there if the Celtics need him to, even in a playoff environment. Depends on the matchup, but there are some teams, Hawks among them, who he could go out and score against if they really need him to.
Yeah, and you feel that way even when the Hawks have their regular core of players around, because, if they're playing Atlanta and this is a playoff game or a regular season game, chances are if Peyton's on the floor, he'd be matched up with Trae Young, which I like his chances of being an impact player offensively when that is the matchup that he's looking at from a defensive standpoint. But, you look at these guys that we saw, other than Sam Hauser, the others are probably not going to see much of any kind of playing time, but you didn't get the sense that they were just out there just trying to occupy space and just keep the clock running, basically. They were out there and they were making plays. They were doing the kind of things that, they give Joe Mazzulla, I think, a little more confidence than before, that when an opportunity to play significant minutes comes their way, they will be more than ready to meet that challenge. And again, I'm with you, Bobby. I'm thinking a lot about Peyton Pritchard in that regard, because a lot of good things happen when he gets a chance to play. But when you look at the guys that are playing ahead of him, you've got the reigning defensive player of the year, Marcus Smart. You've got the probable sixth man of the year in Malcolm Brogdon. You've got Mr. Versatility, Derek White, who plays multiple positions and plays in every game. So they're really, and we're not even talking about Malcolm Brogdon, or excuse me, I just mentioned Malcolm earlier. But the bottom line is there are a number of guys ahead of Peyton Pritchard in the pecking order, which is why he doesn't play. But it is not about his inability and more about opportunity that limits him at this point.
Agreed. Hauser as well. He deserves a mention out of this one. And the last thing I'll ask you about Pritchard, and I did turn to Joe and say this during the game, it is possible this is his last run if they don't suffer any injuries. Of course, there might be some garbage time in the playoffs. That always happens. But if they're healthy, he probably doesn't have a postseason role, as we've seen for much of this year. And they reportedly almost did trade him at the trade deadline. We know the difficult spot he's in, and he's talked about it throughout this year. Being able to put up 30, 14, and 11 and not play. There'll be someone out there this offseason who needs him, and I'm sure they might actually offer the Celtics, after seeing stuff like this season, a decent package. I know he's extension eligible and he only has 1 year left on that rookie deal, but that's still valuable for a team. And I think people have said it throughout this year. If he was on the Lakers, he'd be playing a ton. If he was on some of these lottery teams, he'd be starting today in the final day of the regular season, as he was here, and maybe in some bigger games as well. So this might be the beginning of the end of his time here. And of course, he was very professional with it this year. I know some people didn't like the interviews he gave about his situation at certain moments in the season, and he did seem to think he was going to be traded at a certain point that week in February. But this was a perfect storm, I think, for Boston and him this year, of being able to prove he can get a bigger role elsewhere and helping out the Celtics when they needed him.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of the stuff that he was talking about when he kind of alluded to expecting to be traded, that's not just stuff he's just pulling out of thin air. That comes from conversations between his camp and the Celtics camp, and just some of the stuff that they're hearing and some of the things that they've had conversations about. And so that was very real. The one thing I will say, you know, about Peyton is that, you know, where we sit in for the games, the section that I sit in media, I'm usually surrounded by scouts, and I can just tell you right now, I'd say the couple of weeks before the trading deadline, he was the one player that I was asked most about, as far as what's he like beyond what we see on the court. Are there issues that are keeping him off the court that maybe aren't prevalent? Is there some kind of a gap or a chasm or tension between him and you know, the coaching staff and front office? And there's none of that. The thing that they recognize is, and what I've talked about, is that it's not like he's playing behind guys who can't play. It's not like there are guys that he's playing behind that he's clearly better than, and that's just not the case. But that doesn't change the fact that you know, he's a good player who, when he's getting an opportunity, can play. And the other wild card in this whole, you know, Peyton conversation, and we saw him play tonight, is J.D. Davison. That is a guy that, when you look at his length, you look at his playmaking, he doesn't have the shooting range of Peyton, but what he does have is he's a bigger frame point guard, and he's got a decent mid-range game, which I didn't really realize until the few times I saw him play up in Maine, and even you saw a little bit of that tonight. So between that free throw line and the three-point line, he's a pretty good shooter, and he looks for that shot. And because of his court vision, you really can't just play him for the pass or play him for the shot, because I thought there were a couple of times in the Atlanta game where they just guessed incorrectly, where they thought he was going to look to shoot and he throws a lob to Luke or someone, or they thought he was going to throw the lob and they just gave him the mid-range shot. He has a good he's shown good potential to be able to discern between when to take that mid-range shot and when to look for a teammate for an easier basket. And I think his growth and development makes someone like Peyton Pritchard a little bit more expendable, because he's younger, obviously, and some people, I think, don't realize, or they forgot, that he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So the fact that he's in the NBA after 1 year of college is not that unusual when you are a player that highly regarded in high school. So the Celtics will definitely have some options, but certainly I think that their thinking is that the best thing for Peyton for now is to have him as an insurance policy. But if something transpires this offseason when they move him, they already have somebody kind of in the fold that they're kind of molding to fill that gap if necessary in JD.
Boom, and let's go down the line. Sam Hauser, 26 points for the second consecutive game, on fire from three. Looks like the Sam from the start of the year. In many ways, Celtics offense over the last couple weeks here, looking like the Celtics offense we knew from the beginning of the year. They end this year over the last 15, number one in offense and number one in defense, which I'm sure Mazzulla will mention again in the post game here. Hauser, though, I think this is, and shout out to Mike Muscala, who is amazing here as well. 27, 8-2. If the Celtics are healthy, we probably won't see Mike Muscala, though I think there's a chance we see Hauser, especially considering the season Grant had. Some of the concerns we have about Grant popped up again in this game, and he didn't play a ton, but you did see early in the corner, Sherrod, where he's out faking, he's jab stepping, he's doing too much out there, and then he turns the ball over. Just a constant sight from Grant this year. Another point, I think he turned the ball over and fell down and just kind of sat there. That wasn't a great look either. this is a real competition, I think. And we discussed a couple games ago whether Blake could get involved. Didn't see much from Blake in this one, but Hauser, the shooting and the defensive improvements we've seen from him. And he did have a game in that Toronto miniseries where he's diving all over the place. And I know you guys mentioned the rebounding, the defense, the hustle plays from him. He's starting to put together a pretty complete package here. And again tonight, he goes for the two-handed slam. I saw his brother down in the hallway, Joey Hauser, who plays for Michigan State. And I'm like, what's getting into this guy with all the dunk attempts? And he's like, he must be feeling pretty confident out there. And that's what it is, Sherrod. One year playing in games, okay, he feels like he belongs out there. And that's big going into the postseason because there might be situations where they need him if Grant just doesn't have it.
Excuse me. Hello.
Yeah, and I think that's why that battle for 8 which is really what we're talking about. Who's going to fill that 8th rotation spot? And that's assuming that Joe goes 8 deep, which there's no guarantee of that. But Sam, what Sam is doing, what he's capable of doing, but recognizing he can do more without overdoing it. Like the one thing about Sam that I like most about what we're seeing now is his movement without the ball. I think Sam has done that is the one area of his game that he's probably not going to get enough credit for improvement that he deserves, because he's no longer just a guy that stands at a spot and catch and shoot. Sam is moving without the balls to get in position to catch and shoot. And even when he does catch, he's not always looking to shoot. Sometimes he's looking to put it on the floor, take 1 or 2 dribbles and keep the ball moving, or just catch and get rid of it quickly. He's figuring out ways to force the defense to think of him more than just a catch and shoot guy. And the more they're thinking about what he's going to do, the better his chances of executing what he knows he's capable of doing. And a lot of those, those cuts that he makes along the baseline before, that's just the easy pathway to get to the other side of the court and get a shot off. Now he's doing what Avery Bradley did years ago in Boston, is just using that baseline as almost like a screen setter, where in the ball, if it's top of the key, guys are finding him cutting across the middle for layups. He's doing so much more now offensively that doesn't necessarily show up in the stat sheet as far as his movement, which opens things up for his teammates. The bottom line is Sam Hauser is playing probably as good of basketball as we've seen him play. And the last time we've seen him in this kind of flow of rhythm was at the start of the season when the Celtics were just demolishing everyone. And when you look at all the factors that have kind of got this Celtics team looking more and more like that team that began the start of the season, Sam's play of late is one of the factors that certainly comes into play.
Yes, and I do think there's a real mini competition here going into the postseason, and of course there's the matchup consideration as well. I saw Grandy tweet out there in the game too that Hauser had some pretty monster splits against Atlanta this year. I'm going to pull those up heading into tonight. And then, of course, you see the one from tonight, from this afternoon there. So this looks like a good matchup for him, certainly. He's a guy who could get hunted by Trae Young, and we'll talk about some matchups later, dive into those a little bit since we weren't able to on Friday. But Hauser against Atlanta this year, coming into tonight, averaged 9 of 11 from the field, 9 of 11 from 3, 8 rebounds, 27 points between those two games, 13 points a game. Pretty good. And he adds to that today. So we're now talking about, with today's totals, 18 of 27. Pretty good. Pretty good against this Atlanta team. And 2 of those were real games.
Yeah, and remember, this is an Atlanta team that the Celtics may very well see in the first round if they can go to Miami and win later this week. So there are certain teams that you can clearly see where Sam Hauser matches up really well against. Atlanta is one of them. And to your point, Bobby, Trae Young may be looking offensively to hunt Sam down and try to have Trae go at him. But guess what? The Celtics are going to be doing the same thing to Trae Young. They know that defensively that is something that he's not particularly strong at. And there are certain matchups where they are 100% going to look to exploit that, whether it's getting him matched with a guy like Sam Hauser who can just shoot right over the top, or having him switched out on a guy like Marcus Smart, who will absolutely try to take him down and play a little bully ball. And again, those guys have a little bit of history, which, again, that's part of the reason why I really want that Atlanta Hawks series, just to see how Marcus and Trae Young will interact and engage with each other. But bottom line, with Sam Hauser, he's doing exactly what players in his position should always try to do, and that is make an impact when you get an opportunity, and hopefully that impact can parlay itself into more impactful moments and opportunities, which is obviously that's what Sam Hauser's thinking at this point.
Yeah, and on Grant, who did go, I'm trying to pull up his stats from this game.
Less
not
than
his
6
best
minutes
game,
on the court.
certainly.
Yeah, 2 points.
Yeah. And I saw quite a few bad things in those 6 minutes, which isn't good. -6, 1 for 2. The percentages look fine if you look at them, but below where you should be. March and April, 44% from the field, percent from 3. Only 5 shots per game, which I think needs to go up a little bit too. He needs to just get those off. And 7 points a game, which he should probably be closer to 10. Plus in the plus-minus department, but a lot of that's what the team was doing out there. Had a good game against Utah, though. Again, undermanned Jazz team that night. Milwaukee, solid, okay in that game. He's going in the right direction, I think, in terms of turning it around. He did have that huge 7 for 12 game in the loss against them. But I don't know. It's still not close enough to last year's Grant for me to feel great about him going into the postseason.
Well, you pointed out a couple things that disturbed me really, really, really a lot. And the one incident where he looks like he got tripped or fell, and when there was no call made, he just sat there. He just sat there on the floor. And
that was unbelievable. Josue was mad to my left. He's like, "What are you doing?"
I felt Josue's pain. I mean, that should never happen. I don't care how bad the call is. I don't care how wrong the official was for making that call. You do not sit on your ass in the middle of a game, even if it's the end of the season and there's nothing at stake as far as playoff seeding or anything like that. You just don't do that, because I'm going to go back to something that Joe Mazzulla talked about a few weeks ago, and I think it can't be overstated enough. This time of year, you are trying to build good habits. Sitting on your ass after you don't get a call is not building a good habit. It's very temper tantrum, 3-year-old, I'm not getting my way. That's what that is. And it bothered me because Grant is better than that. That should not be happening. And I know he's been frustrated with just the way he struggled with his shot. Some of the defensive matchups just haven't really gone his way. And certainly the calls damn sure haven't gone his way. That being said, you still have to be professional. You still have to be mindful of the fact that your team is counting on you to be one of the leaders when you get out there on the floor. You don't want anyone to lead something like that, because again, it doesn't do you any good. I mean, did that time that he spent on his ass, did it get him a call? No. Is it going to get him any sympathy with the refs? No. Is it going to help your team win the game? No. And so if it doesn't have any of those type of values attached to it, what the hell are you doing? What's the point? I hope that when they go back and they look at this, that they pull that clip out and just remind Grant that this is what you don't do. This is how you can't play. This is one of the reasons why your role going into the playoffs may not be as robust as you want it to be. Little things like this. You're getting away from doing the little things to help the team. Instead, you're doing the little things that hamper or limit the team. And that just can't be the case. He's got to be better than that.
Agreed. And I'll be interested in seeing how they look at that front court into round one. And a lot of it will depend, of course, on who they play. You might not see as much Grant against Atlanta. Against a Bam, though, and we'll stack up this path. Bam, Embiid, Giannis, the possible 3 matchups inside. You probably do need Grant to some degree, and I know you debated this. His offense, need a little bit more from him. Defensively, though, they're going to need him against certain matchups, which is going to be a difficult balance. Like you want him to be more efficient and to the point offensively, but you can't send a message in the playoffs if you're going to need him guarding Bam, guarding Giannis, guarding Embiid. He's too important in those matchups. And I think he's good enough offensively to suffice what he gives you defensively, which I think is crucial. I don't think there's any way Muscala, Griffin, maybe for spots against Giannis. I like him against Giannis in certain spots. But for over the course of a game, I'd rather have Grant out there guarding Embiid, a Bam, a Giannis. And that's going to make him a shoo-in to the rotation in the playoffs if those are their 3 opponents through the first 3 rounds.
I think it'll help get him on the floor, but I don't think it's going to keep him as a steady part of that rotation. I think it's going to be fluid. I think they're going to try to go without him until they realize that they can't. So Grant, maybe one of those things where Grant doesn't get into at some point in the latter stages or middle of the second round, whereas opposed he would normally get into maybe one of the first, transactional rotational stints. Bottom line with Grant, he has to play better. I mean, we can sit up here and surmise this has to happen, that has to happen. Don't worry about this and that. He's got to play better. Simple, because what he's doing now is not enough. And for me, the frustrating part about Grant right now is that the one thing that he's capable of doing are the small little hustle energy type things. And that's not happening. And that's a problem. That's a real biggie. That's a real problem.
Right now, Celtics winners of 57 games this year, second best team in the league, so they have the second best odds to win the championship. Still right behind the Bucks, plus 240, Celtics plus 360. The Suns coming in at plus 500. Of course, you can get all those, as well as some playoff series as they start to be finalized. Cavs minus 215 against the Knicks. 76ers minus 1,000 against the Nets. And that's all available at FanDuel.com/Boston. Massachusetts, been a month now, I think, just about to the day that FanDuel arrived in Massachusetts, and you can sign up at America's #1 sports book. And new customers here in Mass, of course, you got to be here in Mass. Get $200 bonus bets guaranteed when you sign up. They're still offering it when you've placed your first $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston, deposit 10, $5 bet gets you $200 bonus. You can bet on all your favorite sports, from the money line, point spreads, player props, and more. Bruins looked great last night. I would have had a thrill betting that game against the Devils. And you can go get $200 to do stuff like that in bonus bets, win or lose, when you head to FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more on America's #1 sportsbook. Of course, 21 plus, present in Mass. First online real money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Hope is here. Gambling helpline, ma.org. 800-327-5050 for the phone line. 24/7 support over there. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. They got the lows falling down around me out here, Sherrod, so I'll be out of here in just a minute. I hope Josue's on his way to save the day. But I'll hold it down for just another minute or two here. We're going to talk Brad. Brad talked today. You got some interesting insight from him on Missoula, mostly Jaylen Brown, and Robert Williams in the season he had. Big one, though, out of this one, Sherrod, for all our concerns and questions and everything else about Jaylen Brown's hand, Brad said that he expects Jaylen back at practice middle to later in the week. I don't know if that means he's going to play in game 1 of the playoff series, depending on if it's Saturday or Sunday, but it is encouraging when we were wondering, could this be a longer-term thing, that he should be able to practice at some point this week.
Yeah. I mean, if he's able to go and practice, and the plan obviously at that point is that they're prepping to play him on that first round game, which is it's a very good thing to hear Brad talk about, because the way that his hand looked in that bandage, you wonder if he's got like 5 fingers, left when all said and done. So it's good and encouraging that it sounds like it's not going to be an issue. But again, until I see like where those stitches are, I'm not going to feel comfortable about his ability to just kind of compartmentalize the injury and not let it be a factor when he's out there playing the games. Because if it's something where the stitches on one of his shooting fingers, that's going to take a little bit of time for him to, I think, get comfortable with that added extra, whatever it may be, on that particular finger. But if it's something, let's say, either palm on the outside of his hand or something like that, that's an injury that can easily not be a factor because it doesn't affect the actual rotation of the shot and things like that. So if we can get a better sense of where those stitches were, we get a much more, I think, clearer sense of how long he'll be out. But the fact that Brad was, pretty candid about, him, returning to practice this week, it's not like a torn ACL or MCL injury where even when you come to practice, you still have time to, ramp up to getting back on the court. It's not that kind of injury. So if he's back to practicing next week, I can't imagine why he wouldn't play in that first game.
Yes, I just wonder about the limitations, and this is where we got cut off yesterday. We were going at it a little bit, Sherrod. He's out there great. That's most important, obviously. But he was playing incredible. And I guess it's just like the way I read it is that it's like one of these, like between the finger or something. It's not on the finger, I guess. So I don't know. We'll have to ask him when we talk to him again what kind of limitations he's going through. I just worry if there's a wrap on his hand or something. It's that shooting hand, of course. If this was the left hand, I wouldn't be worried at all. But that shooting hand, he's been shooting so great. He's been in such great control, too. We haven't talked about his turnovers in forever, which I feel like we usually are. If it just makes him slip a little bit, that's what I worry about, rather than whether he's out there or not. He's obviously going to try to get out there somehow, some way for game one.
Yeah, and that's that's a legitimate concern, because whenever you have an injury like this and there seems to be a lot of unknown / ambiguity to it, then you need to see him back out there to be fully confident that this is something that can easily be dismissed and pushed aside as just one of those things. Because he's a big part of what they're looking to do this year. There's no question about it. And they're going to need him to be as close to full strength as possible in order to have their season end the way they want it to.
Absolutely. Other things from this Brad interview, a lot of Joe talk, and Brad pretty emphatic in his defense of Joe this season. You've heard him throughout the year. I think at one point during that losing streak against Indiana and Orlando in the 2-game miniseries, he actually came out and spoke in defense of Joe and the job he was doing. Got a lot of questions about him in this one. Josue at one point asked, are you going to give him any advice? Are you going to talk him through how to handle a series, things like that? And I thought this was a pretty good and interesting answer from Joe. I think I have it lined up here. Let's see. Here it is.
How much do you reach out to him in terms of like navigating through a best of 7 series, or do you just do what you've been doing all season long in the sense of keeping communication with coach?
We talk every day, but I want to go back to this. Joe's a strength. So, like, he's done a really good job. And, I understand because he's new that, the easiest thing to do is nitpick him. But he's done a really good job. If he needs me, I'm here. And if he, but I trust him and I trust his staff. And they've all done a good job. And I think our players would all second that.
I agree. I mean, when you look at the totality of what Joe Mazzulla has done, factoring in the circumstances under which he became the head coach, and look at where they are, they're basically, up 2, 3, 4 quarters of good basketball away from having the best record in the NBA. So the big picture is a very optimistic one that Brad presents, and understandably so, because again, you start looking at the receipts that Joe Mazzulla has been racking up this year, and it's impressive. But that being said, let's not pretend as if this team's goal is all of a sudden lowered now. The goal from the beginning of the season was to win a championship. And you have to ask yourself, has he made the kind of growth as the head coach so that particular goal remains intact? Are they still a team that is capable of winning a championship? And is he the type of leader to make that happen? Those are to me, the $1 million questions that, we'll find out more about that obviously in the coming weeks and months. But if I'm simply going by the growth that he has had from the beginning of the season to where he's at now, I think most Celtics fans should feel very confident that he's going to put these guys in position to be the last team standing. Because I just think he's made areas of improvement and growth in damn near every area of concern that he had maybe a month and a half ago.
Josue, you asked the question. We just played Brad's answer to you about Joe. I found it interesting. We talked quite a bit about Joe here, obviously, too, and welcome in. I'm going to go check the locker room and relocate real quick while you guys talk out Brad, Jalen. We've hit on the game so far, Josue, too. So wherever you want to take this, go ahead, and I'll be back in just 5-10 minutes, guys.
And I promise, Josue, we will not talk about your Easter suit.
What you mean? Why not, man? I'm looking damn good today.
Oh, damn it.
We could save that talk for
yes.
post show. I got you there. But no, I like that Brad Stevens went ahead and did this, right? I mean, this was unplanned. He just told the media, hey, I'm available. I got some things to say. And it's good. And one of the things that surprised me from his response to my question was saying that he speaks to Joe Mazzulla daily. And I don't know, maybe thinking about it after a while, I guess it makes sense, Sherrod, but don't you feel like Brad's kind of guy that wants Joe to, take his lumps on his own? I don't think he's been navigating him closely throughout the entire season, but the fact that he revealed that they talk daily, I think that's cool, man. I think that's pretty, for the boss to chime in and obviously be available is one thing, but to have that connection, day to day, I think it's important, especially when it's your first season and especially when the expectations are this high, because Brad has been in a similar situation, but he didn't go through this during his first year, right, Sherrod? I mean, the Celtics weren't championship contenders that first year. It took them 2-3 seasons to obviously, as the team got better, to get comfortable with the position as head coach. But, and also know what it's like to go through a grind, a best of 7 series against an opponent. So, I mean, I guess what I wanted to hear was he going to do that, right? Will you be talking to him every day? And for him to say, yeah, I've been talking to him every day already, I thought that was pretty cool, going into the playoffs.
Well, one of the things that I think we sometimes lose sight of is that, the relationship between Brad and Joe really isn't that radically different than when it was between Brad and Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge talked to Brad often. There were times I know where I was literally put on hold because he got a call from Brad and they needed to talk about something. And that's fine. That it should be that way, particularly when you're early in your coaching career and there's just a lot of things that you have questions about, that you're not sure about, that you want to make sure that you're doing the best job you can possibly do in the position that you have. Now, I will say this. I think the nature of their conversations is dramatically different. Danny, Brad came here with no expectations of success early on. And your GM is someone who's literally been in your shoes as an NBA head coach. He's in the front office here. He's done enough to where he has a certain cachet when you speak to him about some of the things you need to do, some things you might want to avoid, et cetera, so on. Joe Mazzulla is very different because he's been on that bench. He's been in those huddles. He understands these guys in a different way than if they would have brought in someone from the outside. And I think one of the things Brad has talked about previously was how he just wants to make sure that Joe knows that he's available, that he's there, that if we need to talk, we can talk, but in that the lines of communication is a pipeline that is never going to get clogged. It's always going to be free flowing. And Joe Mazzulla wisely takes advantage of that because, you look at just the way that Brad kind of helps craft and cultivate this team. There's certain elements of it that are just, it's very Brad Stevens-like. And if you look at Joe Mazzulla, you can see some similarities. The one big difference, I think, is that Joe is a little bit more locked into figuring out ways to get more points scored. That's we're seeing that manifest when these guys can drop 100 and some change on you in 3 quarters. That happened tonight or today against Atlanta. So Joe Mazzulla has done, I think, a really good job of kind of slowly, creating the narrative of who his team is and what they can do. Like, this team scores a ton of points, and when they want to lock in defensively, they can be absolute hell out there for teams to deal with, but they don't necessarily lock in as much on that as they probably should. Joe is trying to figure out the best way to get them to be a little bit more, offensive minded in terms of good quality shot selection, but maintain a certain amount of defensive discipline, because Joe Mazzulla knows better as well as anyone at the end of the day, your ability to defend at a high level at all positions, more than anything else, is going to catapult you into the conversation and hopefully the positioning of being the last team standing.
Yeah, no question, for sure. And I think one thing we learned from this season, I mean, we probably learned this a couple of months ago, is the fact that they're just not going to be that team that they were last year defensively. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, it isn't exactly what people expected, because I'm sure people, months ago still had the hopes of seeing Robert Williams be that guy on the defensive end. And, once realizing that he wasn't going to do that, I mean, that's where you came to the realization that defensive team, that defensive-minded team is just not there. But offensively, I mean, this wasn't them last year either, right, Sherrod? I mean, what they're doing, even when guys like either Tatum or Brown aren't even around, is impressive because of the offensive weapons that they didn't have last year. Derek White, a version of him that we didn't see last season, played all 82 games. Malcolm Brogdon wasn't on his team last year. Another playmaker, someone that can also give you 20 plus when he feels like it, essentially, right? Another weapon they didn't have last year. But Sam Hauser is an interesting piece. A couple of nights ago, he told us, he's not quite sure if he'll play every single game, but he's going to be ready for when his name is called. And I'm like, Sam, your name better be called early and often, if you ask me. I honestly think that he's important, because if he gets going from deep, that just changes things for both the bench and the starting unit, whether you have someone like Tatum in the mix with those second unit guys, or you have someone like Brogdon, or another player that can really get going or get more open looks because of the Sam Hauser knocking down 3-pointers.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to the start of the season when the Celtics were just steamrolling over everyone, and you start kind of just sifting through the weeds and look at that data, stats, analytics, and then you realize Sam Hauser was freaking killing it in terms of knocking down shots. Right. And I remember one time Tatum was joking about how Sam should thank him for getting all those open damn looks. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, Jason, you might want to thank him because you get some pretty damn good looks too.
Right.
Because
he makes life easier for you,
yeah.
right?
And to me, that's the challenge for Sam is it was figuring out what's the best path towards being able to help this team and being able to help them consistently. Before you came on, Josue, me and Bobby were talking about Sam, and the one thing I wanted to stress was that Sam has figured out ways to be more than just a catch and shoot sniper. He puts the ball on the floor now. He dunks when the opportunity presents itself. He does so many more things now offensively that I just knew he was. I didn't know if it was in his bag. To be honest with you, like his ability.
He's looking like a young Ray out there. Remember when Ray used to dunk on people? That's what you remind me of, man.
I'm not going to go there, Josue. I think this is the slow down there, fella. Easy, fella. Portion of the program.
That quarter three today looked a little Rayish though. The catch off the inbound.
He's had a few Ray Allen-esque moments. I will give you that. But he ain't Ray. Don't pull Tommy, Steve's Bill Russell line. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
But Sam has done a lot of good things though that you like. I mean, I love the fact that he moves so well without the ball. I think that's the part of his game that has made the most growth from where he was at the start of the season to where he's at now. His ability to not only move without the ball, but when he's moving, how he's capable of forcing that defense to shift a little bit more because they're so worried about him catching the ball in the corner and shooting. And it's to the point where, they will trail him as he goes on the baseline. And the Celtics have done a good job of force feeding the ball to him on the block where a defender's behind him, where he has a layup. And Sam, I would say the last 4 or 5 games, he's probably getting like a bucket every game that way. And when you are talking about advancing from one round to the next, every basket matters because that layup that came off a steal in the inbounds that got you 2 points could very well be the margin of victory at the end of the night. So Sam, I think, is doing a good job of finding ways to impact the game offensively, get himself in position to make plays. And the Celtics, to their credit, they have done a good job of positioning him and empowering him, whether Tatum is out there or not, empowering him to feel confident, to be aggressive, to be the kind of shooter and scorer that they know he's capable of, and he knows he's capable of as well.
Yeah, man, moving out the ball. I mean, that's a big part of his game for sure. I mean, last year we weren't even quite sure what they were going to get outside of just catch and shoot, right? So he certainly worked on his game, and he saw those minutes. He saw that opening for him to contribute, and he took advantage. So shout out to him for that, man. He's just having fun out there. This past weekend, it just felt like senior night, one of those nights where everyone plays, everyone's laughing and smiling, and you look up and they're up by double digits. I mean, that was the vibes here at TD Garden, Friday, and of course today as well. Seeing Payton Pritchard, who's actually speaking right now at the podium. I'm sure Bobby will get a question in or two. We'll hear from him in a second, but I'm sure you guys talked about him briefly, but I'm going to bring him up anyways. Triple double out of Payton. And it's funny, Sherrod, I'm turning to Bobby and I'm like, man, like this doesn't surprise me at all. If anything goes down this postseason, whether it's unfortunate, hopefully not, but an injury or even something happens in the middle of a game, you just know he's going to be ready for when his name is called. I don't think that's part. I don't think no one's questioning that part of Payton's game, but I think that when you look at what he's able to do offensively, that type of outside touch, you can't help but wonder if Joe does call his name. What happens there in these post-game situations. I mean, he did get a little bit of playing time last year, but he's a much better player now, right? I mean, even though he's not a shoo-in in Joe Mazzulla's rotation, you can still see the strides he's made this season.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely done the things that you are supposed to do to give yourself a chance, an opportunity to play when your number's called. This is clearly not going the way he would have hoped it would go, and certainly you can't really knock the Celtics for not playing him because when you look at the guys that are ahead of him, with all due respect, they're better. they're just better. They have more size, they have more length. Some can't shoot as well as he can, but you know what? He can't defend as well as some of them, so it kind of balances out. But the thing I will say about him is that he has remained professional about this entire process, knowing that he's more than open to being traded because he knows that there's a high probability that he's not going to play the kind of minutes and position himself to get a second contract. Let's be honest, the contract is a thing. And another team would have allowed him to thrive, I think, a little bit more. But, there are lessons that he can learn in the limited role that he has with the Celtics. And I think the biggest one he's going to take away when he leaves, because he's going to leave at some point, is that you cannot take anything for granted. That you have to really understand that if you are a non-superstar on your team, the rope in which that they're going to give you is shorter. Tatum can go 5, 6, 7 games without shooting the ball well. And guess what's going to happen on game 7? He's going to start. Guess what's going to happen on game 8? He's still going to start. When you are a backup and you have a very limited niche role, if you're not getting certain things done, your number may not be called. You may go from playing like 15, 20 minutes a game to DMPCDing it down the street afterwards. And that's a reality that a lot of these players, don't really understand or embrace. But it's something that's real. It's the Celtics are seeing that up close and personal on a regular basis, no doubt.
Definitely. No, for sure. I mean, look, people could say, oh, man, this is great exposure for him. And maybe he was, taking advantage of the situation. I'm like, go for it. Why not? I mean, whether people want to call it a trade request or not, I mean, he was certainly open for that because he was looking for a new opportunity, if things weren't going to improve here. And it certainly hasn't for Payton, but he's remained positive. He hasn't checked out and the injury didn't help things. But now that he's, back to being available, this is the kind of production he can give you, right, on a night like this or a matchup like this, and it's a great warm up for the postseason, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and that's really what ultimately this always comes back to. How are the things you're doing now helping prepare you for the playoffs? Because that's the barometer of success. You either win it all or you don't. I don't think there's a lot of gray area with the Celtics team as far as what they can. What they're looking to do and what the opportunities to do that look like.
Definitely. All right, Sherrod, that's going to do it for this show, man. Bobby Manning, he's got a little tied up right now. We're about to start recording soon. I mean, it's Easter Sunday. We got some great segments coming up for you guys to check out. But before we get out of here, though, real quick, Grant Williams, didn't see a whole lot from him in this game. It was one of those nights from the very beginning. He was yapping at the referees, or one of those days, I guess I should say. Yapping at the referees at the beginning, just seemed really frustrated, just out of sync with the rest of the team. What do you make of it? Is it a little bit of, am I making too much of nothing here, or are we going to keep a close eye on Grant and how he looks in this first round?
Well, we may not have to look very far because Grant's probably going to be the guy on the bench that we recognize. I don't think he's going to play much, and I base that on the fact that he's not making the most of the minutes that he's getting. Now, there's certain matchups where they're probably going to give him a role or an opportunity to play. Like if they play the Hawks, for example, I could probably see him, seeing some spot duty against them. But he hasn't done enough of late to solidify his place in that regular rotation. And then you look at a guy like Sam Hauser. I look at Sam as their 8th man now. At this point, playing, if they go with the traditional start 5 and you got maybe Rob coming off the bench with Malcolm, Sam to me is that next guy to play. And Grant, he'll get opportunities to play his way back into the good graces of Joe Mazzulla, but it's not going to happen in game 1 of the playoffs. I just don't think it's going to be that easy. And the decision will be one that if you're a Celtics fan, you kind of understand why Joe wouldn't play him. He hasn't played well. And then you look at Mike Muscala, he gets out there and he drops like 25 or 26.
Oh, look at Blake, man. Blake, even if it's just energy and just getting back on defense, like little things like that, he's making a bigger impact.
Yeah. He's no longer doing the little things other than pouting, which is something we don't like to see. No one likes to see that, particularly when you go like 3-year-old pouting where you don't.
When he was sitting on the other end of the floor while the play's going on the other side, like, what are you doing, man?
That bothered the hell out of me. I'm not gonna lie. I love Grant, but that pissed me off because that should never happen.
Get up, man. You're one of the dudes that gets an opportunity. Look at these guys who are working their asses off, knowing that they're probably not going to play a whole lot in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, even when Tatum gets a call or a non-call, the hands go up, but the feet are moving. And that's what I want. You can bitch and moan and complain about a call. That's on you, but don't just stand there while the play is going on, because guess what that opponent is going to do? They're going to figure out real quick who you should be guarding, and they're going to go to that person, and then they're going to put your defense in rotation. And next thing you know, you got freaking, Bruno Fernando under the rim with the rock for a dunk.
Yep.
And they're looking at you like, what the F are you doing?
How did that happen? Right.
Yeah. So he's just got to get out this funk, man. He needs to see the ball go through the net a couple times. I personally think the best pathway for him to get back in the good graces is to do the little things. Get your ass on the floor, dive for loose balls, draw charges, do all those things that no one really wants to do in the grand scheme of playing basketball that help your team win. Because guess what? Blake Griffin figured out real quick that's how you get on the floor.
Right.
And so he needs to take a page from Blake and just become more of a grinder instead of a guy that's looking for glory out there.
Get back to the basics for sure, Graham. I like that. Maybe even give him the line that that who was it? Who gave this advice to Ben Simmons? It was Garnett, KG. He said, "Man, remember why you fell in love with this game. Go back to the basics, Grant. Come on, man."
He needs to be
why you love this game so much, Sherrod.
Yeah, he needs to be on that grind, Grant. That's what he needs to be, on the grind, Grant. You get back to being on the grind, Grant. You get in the game. That's simple.
Definitely. All right, this episode of the Celtics Postgame Show is also brought to you by Athletic Greens. You know what they're doing over there at AG1, man. They make things easy. Athletic Greens is giving you a year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs when you head to athleticgreens.com/garden. If you haven't already, take care of your health and get on that. That's athleticgreens.com/garden. He is Sherrod Blakely. I am Josue Pavon for Bobby Manning. We already know, guys, we're definitely going to go live at some point throughout this week. I'm assuming after Tuesday when we find out which team the Celtics will be playing in the first round, whether it's the Atlanta Hawks or the Miami Heat. We will recap everything that you have to look forward to in this first round matchup. I'm sure Sherrod will join us. And, of course, you can check out Sherrod on the A-List podcast. What you guys got going on this week, man? I know there's a new episode coming up, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to do a little bit of reflection on just the season, look ahead to the playoffs. We'll probably post after we know who the matchup is. But, I've made it very clear I'm hoping it's Atlanta for first and foremost, selfish reasons. I love Atlanta.
Yeah, you do.
But if I'm the Celtics, I would also love to see Atlanta first round if I'm the players, because I think that's the path of least resistance for you to get to where you want to be at the end of the day. Miami is just a rock fight that you don't really need to have, because that's what it's going to become, because that's the only way they can win. And they've got one of the best coaches at positioning them to be successful, whether it's regular season, but particularly in the playoffs. So,
yeah, that's the coaching matchup, right? If you get the Heat, man, that's where you're going to get the coaching matchup. And you could get 7 games. I still like the Celtics' chances, but if you want to make things, on the simpler side, you go against the Heat. I agree with that.
Yeah. Just bring on the Hawks.
Right. I wouldn't mind a visit to Atlanta.
I know you wouldn't, Josue.
Either way, it's the first round's looking pretty good for us, and that's gonna do it for us. CLNS Media, you already know, plenty of coverage and more from this game, recapping the Celtics regular season and looking ahead to the first round matchup of the playoffs. He is Sherrod Blakely. I am Josue Pavon. We'll see you guys next time. Happy Easter, everybody! Enjoy your day, enjoy your time with your family, and we'll see you guys later this week.
Later, people.
See ya.